This is the goal, to make available for life every place where life is possible, to make inhabitable all worlds as yet uninhabitable, and all life purposeful.
The Interplanetary Podcast. The exploration of space for the benefit of all humankind. Your hosts in England and the Netherlands, Matthew, Russell and Julio Aprea.
Do-da-do-da-do-da-do-da.
Oh,
yeah, baby. Obert.
Hermann Julius Obert. By the way, do you want to do it again with a German accent or a Romanian accent?
A Romanian accent. You sure I'll be able to do one?
No, it's fine. Matt, tell me who was Hermann Obert.
He is a space legend. From memory, and I am going to be doing this from memory, there's the Obert maneuver, isn't there, where if you fire your thrusters at your lowest point of your orbit to get the most amount of bang for your buck.
Correct. I'm just trying to think in my mind now. Yes, that's how you raise your orbit. At the lower side, you fire to raise your orbit on the far side. I'm not going to use the technical terms. And then on the other side, let's say on the furthest you are in your orbit, you fire again to circularize your orbit. But okay, let's go back to the man Julius. I kind of like his middle name.
you want to just call him Julius?
Hermann Julius, yes. Austro-Hungarian German physicist and engineer, legend of rocketry and spaceflight at the level of Tsiolkovsky or Goddard, right? Famous. I'm looking at the Wikipedia article and cheating a little bit, but it just pops out that a notable student was Wernher von Braun,
which is and today's guest as well was a student as well. Isn't that cool?
Yes.
So we're only 2 degrees of separation from Obert now, which is as good as it gets as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, this is what I love about interviewing some of my colleagues, because I learn things that they just don't come up during coffee breaks.
Yeah. By the way, one of my lecturers was Obert.
By the way,
that's like just brilliant.
Can you pass me the milk?
Excellent.
So that's in part why we chose the phrase today, when we learned that Ruedegar Albat, our interview, the person we interviewed in this episode, he was a student of this person, Hermann Julius Obert.
So
I will keep stressing the middle name. Just saying.
Yeah. So Julio.
Yes.
Give me a little bit of a rundown on our guest today and why he's mega cool for this week.
Well, Ruedegar Albat, he will during the interview he gives us a whole rundown of his career, but he's currently both the head of the Ariane 5 program at the European Space Agency and also the Future Space Transportation Program, which is basically what comes after Ariane 6 and Vega C. Right.
And what was Ariane 5 famous for doing this week?
On
Christmas Day, no less.
On Christmas Day, Ariane 5 launched a particularly notable payload. Notable, is that a good word for it?
Notable, yes, I think notable.
Some space telescope into a very, very precise trajectory towards the Lagrange point 2. Maybe you know what payload I'm talking about.
I think it might be the JWST, the James Webb Space Telescope.
Correct. So yes, Rudy has been working quite some time on this one, and I wanted to get a little bit of that experience for our audience.
But he wasn't the only person at the launch, was he? He wasn't the only person.
There was a big team at the launch.
He definitely wasn't the only person. But what I'm saying is, Julio, there was someone else there, wasn't there? someone else at the launch, and his name is Julio Aprea.
Julius Aprea.
Julius.
Just changed my name.
Should change it to Herman. Yeah. Herman Aprea.
I had the privilege to also attend the launch, covering the communications and PR aspects of it.
So how was it? How was the launch? How did it feel?
It was the most stressful launch of my life. I mean, I didn't have as many launches as Rudy does under his belt, and many of them I was not directly involved. I was mostly witnessing, but I never felt before that there was so much at stake in one launch as this one. I wonder how the people in Apollo 11 felt, right? But I always remember a phrase when Mark McCrocken came to the show, that he basically said something on the lines of that astronauts at the end are just bags of water, right? And I mean, I was extremely, extremely nervous for the launch of Matthias Maurer, as one of the few currently active astronauts that I know, and personally, and who I consider a friend. And of course, you are always worried about the safety of the people you know.
He's a lovely bag of water.
Yes, he's a lovely bag of water. But I could feel the tension. In this launch, I could feel you also had the VIPs, the clients, the public, the journalists. Everyone was super, super respectful, and yes, when that iconic image of that, we just published a video yesterday with a nice quality video on how James Webb, the telescope, separates the telescope, not the person, separates from the Ariane 5 upper stage. You could really see the shoulders going down, the people starting to breathe again, and when the solar panel deployed and there was the announcement that the payload was what we call power positive, that it was running on solar power instead of batteries, the celebration, it was incredible. I really am at a loss of words to describe it. The joy, the excitement.
It's got the joy and excitement. Does it equal out the stress beforehand? Is it if the amount of stress before, are you getting the same amount of enjoyment on the other side of the seesaw?
On the day of the launch, yes, I felt more relaxed. It was very, very nice to share a moment of celebration after with the team. And I think that was unique. But let's remember that we're not out of the woods yet, right? Because the telescope is still unfolding, and then it will have to cool down, and then it will have to calibrate, and then we still have a few months until the first observation. But it's going well so far. You also have to celebrate the intermediate milestones, right? You can and this was a major achievement. I felt proud for the team, the ESA people, the Ariane Space people, Ariane Group, this whole industry. I even felt very, very proud of this company, Realtra in Ireland, that made the cameras, because if the impact it has on the public to actually see things, right? To see that separation instead of just hearing that it happened, that you can actually see it. Yes, it's. I think it's one of the highlights so far in my career. This having been a minor part of this launch.
Do you know what, Julio? You gave me bragging rights in the fact that I knew someone at the launch. So that's how cool it is.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt. That my blood, sweat, and tears.
Is my bragging rights. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think we should get to the interview, because it's a blooming long one, but it's also absolutely epic.
Certainly, and I like I said that I always love to bring some of my colleagues because I get to ask them things that I don't ask randomly. I need the excuse of an interview, and I learned a lot about Rudy today, and I'm very, very happy to work with him. And I mean, I was happy before, but even more now. I don't know if I got to know him a little bit better, and I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like a really lovely guy.
He is.
So, without any further ado, écoutez.
The Interplanetary podcast, putting the ace back into space.
We're joined on the podcast by Ruedegar Albat from ESA. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you for having me here this afternoon of the 31st of December.
New Year's Eve.
Almost the end of 2021.
And there you go. There was a little clue who I'm joined by also. There's Julio, the effervescent Julio. So, Ruedegar, tell us a little bit about your journey into space, how you got into space and what your kind of childhood interests, etc. were and how you've ended up where you are.
Well, this is quite a journey, and it started very early because I'm a pure Apollo kid. So I was born in the 60s, and I was born with black and white television, and Apollo was on it. And I followed it from my early days. I was 9 years old when Apollo 11 went to the moon, and 10 years old when Apollo 13 circled around the moon to come safely back. And so everything started very early. When I was 13 years old, I got a stiff neck because I was always looking up to the skies, until I had the opportunity to do glider flying. In Germany, this you could start very early with 13. So I was a pilot with 14 and flying gliders alone with 14. I had no right to drive a motorcycle or the right to fly gliders. And so it went on, and things become faster and faster and faster. And when I was heading to university, space was the place to be. And when I ended with my university in Munich, space happened in French Guiana, and it was a young team. Today you would call that a startup. It was not called startup at that moment, but roughly 100 people in the jungle starting rockets. This was absolutely new. And so I went to French Guiana. I was hired there, spent 7 wonderful years between Ariane 1 and Ariane 4. And then I came back to Europe, and the travel continued up to now.
Wow, Rudy, you were there since Ariane 1. I didn't know that. I learned something new today.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to launch 8 Ariane 1s to 3 from the first part, from ELA 1, right at the beginning.
Before we go a little bit deeper in Ariane, that we will be spending a lot of time during this interview, I was curious, your childhood was mostly in Germany, right?
Yeah.
And when you went to French Guiana, was that your first experience living abroad?
It was. I had the opportunity during my studies to do internships abroad. But the first time I left Europe was in 1986 when I went to Guyana.
Okay. And you said you went to university in Munich, but originally you are also from Bavaria, or from where?
I'm from Bavaria, yes. But I didn't select Munich because it was close. I selected it because in terms of space in Europe, in Germany, it was really the place to be. They had excellent tutors there and close connections. Not so much in Europe, but mostly to the United States.
What was the actual degree that you did? What was the title of it?
Master of Engineering in Aeronautics and Astronautics.
He was already decided on that field.
I knew that. I knew that. I mean, that's a typical way when you start flying early. You will land around your passion, and you have the big opportunity to live a professional life around your passion. And this is really a great gift.
Yeah, because I have to say that when you mentioned that you were flying gliders at 14, it sounds young. It sounds very young.
Yeah, but this was the way it went. I had my pilot license before I got a driver license.
Matt, how old are your sons?
Do you know what? It's actually George wanted to do his pilot's license before he got his driving license. He could actually still do that. So, yeah, it'd be quite a good thing to do. I believe Neil Armstrong's the same. A couple of the others got their pilot's licenses before their driving licenses.
I don't know. As a parent, I'm terrified about that idea. My 14-year-old flying a glider.
I'm kind of more
different time. I guess.
I'm terrified of them driving a car, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough.
How bad I was.
While flying a glider, you in general are surrounded by much more serious people than by taking the car off your dad or your mum.
You're less likely to be driving it back home from the pub. That's what.
All right. Sorry, I digressed, but I wanted to know more about that.
Well, the thing that interests me, when you arrived in French Guiana, was it literally chopping through the jungle time? As in, presumably, when the spaceport out there was pretty rough when it first started.
There was a big transformation running. The first thing which was fun for me was that the people around me were so young. We were the youngest launch team of the world. And this was something which was frightening Ariane customers when they came to French Guiana and they saw all these young people, very simply because there was no experience in Europe. And build up experience, you'd better do it with young people. They are simply cheaper. So the average age in the launch team was around 26. And that was really a nice gang. So we were really living together there and having fun together and flying there and ramping up Ariane. When I started, we roughly did 1 to 2 launches per year, and one of the 2 might have been a failure. And then came Ariane 4, and within 3 to 4 years, a real industry was built, and we ramped up to 12 flights per year, meaning that this became a real launch machine, a real launch factory. And this was something amazing for a young engineer coming, seeing all these pioneers. I met them, but then jumping within nothing of time to a real major industry. It happened very fast. Like we saw it again with SpaceX between 2013 and 2017. Everyone was surprised how SpaceX could do it so fast. And everyone in Europe had forgotten that this has already happened in Europe 25 years before. I
guess youth and being fully dedicated, let's say, having no life other than that job, it's a big part of it, I guess.
Yeah, we started about this space nerd discussion, and if you're not a little bit nerdy, you won't support that. And there are people which do not support it. And I have to confess, later I got interested also in other things than space rockets, and this drove down a little, not my passion, but the commitment. If you have a family, if you want to see your kids grow up, you will make compromises, and we all did, but this did not limit our passion to Ariane and to access to space.
And as a little bit of context, when you went to French Guiana, what year are we talking about? And how old were you?
86. I was 25 years old.
And you started then with the Ariane 1. It was a sort of fast period between Ariane 1 and Ariane 3.
It was, yes. The first Ariane 4 flew in 88. And Ariane 2 and 3 were retired in 1990. So there was an overlap of roughly 3 years where both pads were operated in parallel. And this was really fun because the first pad was a copy of a semi-digital analog US pad of the 60s. So we operated consoles and computers from the 60s. And Ariane 4 was simply the most modern pad ever built in the 80s, fully digital. And this was a real cultural revolution. So it was like if we were allowed to fly at the same time Super Constellations and 707s. So
and at that time you were in Arianespace, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're saying that you were with this young team. Presumably all your colleagues at the time have gone on to be all the various heads and big cheeses in space, in kind of ESA, Ariane, etc., etc. Is that right? Or did they all go off and do different things?
Half, I would say. Half of them went off and did different things, and these different things could be renting sailboats in Tahiti. And the other half remained in the space circus, yes. And there, if you spend a career of 35 years in a growing, and this was a growing business over the last 35 years, of course, careers developed. Some of them made quite nice careers. But this was, I don't think that this was the first motivation. The first motivation, I think, was really curiosity, to learn as much as you can. And this is something which still astonishes me. In 1986, I would not have expected to work on rockets over 35 years, but I simply never got bored.
I mean, it's hard to overstate, isn't it, how much of an influence Ariane 4 in particular had on, say, commercial space. It's kind of like really, I suppose, in some ways, the first proper commercial space craft. It kind of way before SpaceX did.
Oh yes,
did it.
Yes, it was.
Is that something that you find a little bit frustrating, that kind of history is maybe not talked about as much as it should be?
Frustration would be a too strong word. First of all, I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to live this period. And it is true, absolutely true what you say. This was really a crazy idea born in Europe by a couple of people, not more than three, to do money in space, very simply, and to do commercial business. And to do this with an Ariane 1 at that time was a little bit crazy. You needed to be a little bit crazy and to believe that you could build up commercial services for access to space. This was brand new, absolutely not existing anywhere else. And that was something which was really fun, even for me in the launch team, because we were all committed. We were all committed to look to new ways to build new services to customers, to expand our way of working for them, and to do something better than any Air Force launching around us. So I'm not frustrated, but I'm quite happy to see that now there's a second industrial revolution going on, and SpaceX started it good, so it's going on, and it will give us all even more access to space, and it will develop an eighth continent. So I'm fine with that too. And Europe will participate to this conquest again.
And in a way, it has accelerated all the industry, right?
Yeah.
Because we are all working in this more competitive environment now, which I think is a good thing.
Well, in terms of Ariane 4, what was the big? Because it seems like, I'm just talking as a total sort of bystander punter type person. It seems like there is a big leap from Ariane 4 to Ariane 5, that presumably there was a great deal of design work, etc., to make Ariane 5. What was the motivation behind it, and why was it, you were there at the time. So yeah, talk us through a little bit how that happened.
The people which have run the sector at that moment they had really big capacity of imagination. And when Ariane 1 was born, it was already clear that this launcher was born to clone a Delta II for Europe and to get autonomous access to space for communication satellites of the PEM-D class. PEM-D was the class of Delta IV, around 1.3 metric tons. But at that time, middle of the 70s, the team which imagined Ariane 1 already had built in a growth factor of 4, meaning that they were able to push this Ariane 1 vehicle with the same concept up to 5 metric tons, even 6. So they gave by this the opportunity to do double launches, which was the first again in worldwide, share a launch cost by a factor of 2, and then allow growth of spacecraft beyond everything was imagined. I remember when we started the first Big Bird, its name was Big Bird, and it was 4.2 metric tons. And we thought that never, ever again such a big spacecraft would be launched again. But it was because telecommunication via space became a real industry. which was not the case in the middle 80s, but in the end of the 80s, it became a real industry, and satellites grew roughly 200 kilos per year in order to put more payload, more transponders, gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes on board. So there was a tremendous hunger for gigabytes, and these made these satellites growing into classes which did not allow any single launches anymore for Ariane 4. So the last 50 or so Ariane 4 flew all in single launch, because the satellites grew up to the limits of Ariane 4, close to 5 tons. Then came at the same time appetite around Ariane, because this has been becoming a real industry, a real business. So competition grew up, and the empire stroked back again, not the British one, but the US one. And then came competition that was good. So Europe needed something to compete, and compete would mean that a new launch concept was needed, because Ariane 4 was at its limits. And this was one of the reasons to give birth to Ariane 5, because Ariane 5 started where Ariane 4 ended, around 5 metric tons, and it's flying today close to 12. Also a big growth potential. So basically, the rockets grew with the passengers. And this was true until recently, until electric propulsion popped up in the second half of the last decade. And now we have seen for these big telecom satellites in geostationary orbit that it's over. The big beasts are replaced by smaller electrical spacecraft, but there's something new popping up, and this we see it with OneWeb imagined in Europe, or Skylink imagined in the US by SpaceX, meaning that fast telecommunication needs low Earth orbit links via constellations. And this again will produce an industrial revolution in this decade. So basically the launches we see all today, and I will not talk about reusability, which will be the third element of revolution. All these vehicles fly today in the Ariane 5 class. Basically Falcon 9 is a small Ariane 5, Delta 4 is a big, so in between you see Proton or the H2 in Japan. All these vehicles are between mid and heavy.
Like all of these rockets back in that design adapted to that existing market that was of the big telecom satellite that was extrapolated to keep growing until that revolution of electric propulsion that you mentioned, right?
Yeah. There was not a single design driver, but it was clearly the main design driver. All these rockets were optimized for transporting heavy telecom satellites to GTO, something which is still a market, but much less than 10 years ago. So there are new design drivers. And
Indeed. And before we move into these changes that are happening now in the industry, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your career during Ariane 5 itself. I remember that, well, one of the times, disclaimer, I was working with you as well on a previous version of Ariane 5. So yeah, I just wanted to get a little bit of a feeling on the different roles that you had in Ariane 5 over the years.
Thank you. Yeah. My generation had the chance to get the opportunity to live many roles during the career, and once I had finished with the launch team after roughly 40 launches, I wanted to learn how business is working and how projects are run, and so I became a project engineer during the production start of Ariane 5. And I was co-located in Italy and taking care of the ramp up of these new big solid boosters, which was again a new industry which did not exist before. And this allowed me to learn a lot about about projects, but not about running a company. And after this experience as a project engineer, we started to take a new challenge, which was cutting costs of Ariane 5 by a factor of 2 from 1997 to 2002. And to do this, we had created a cost-killing team, a platform which embedded all major stakeholders, which had a role in the supply chain, being them suppliers or integrators or system integrators, all together around round table. Each stakeholder had the same voice, and this was run in an embedded mode with taking all these stakeholders on board of this cost-killing team. It was a big success because we were able to, not 50%, we made 40, but this is the only example, at least I know, where minus 40% have really been done with the same design and the same production infrastructure. And
what was the major? Do you recall some major saving? Was it mostly like production means, how to handle the production line, or what were the sort of changes that you can recall?
1/3 of the wins came for free by the ramp up from growing from a mean cadence of 3 to something around 6. So this was already giving roughly 15 to 18%. And then came the classical branches you all use when you do cost engineering, meaning that you look for purchase power. For example, the carbon fibers, we bought them with Airbus together. We invented a lead buyer and we got the carbon fibers. Airbus airplanes had a purchase power factor 10 with respect to us. So we used their purchase power to get our fibers also linked to their batches. And this brought cost savings of roughly 50%. Organization was a big shot, meaning that we ramped up without creating new infrastructure, meaning that we killed sleeping times.
You distributed the fixed cost.
And we distributed the fixed cost fairly over the supply chain. This was the second big shooter. We simplified management rules. We were the first one, for example, first team in the 90s offering planning information via internet. This was something which was totally new, a planning tool which was run on our own platform on internet. This was copied by car industry. We were first. So innovation was part of it as well, innovative processes. So one example could be the fiber placement, which was invented in the 90s and tested first on the vehicle equipment bay of Ariane 5. And we were the test bed for these technologies. And when it went well, CASA used them for all Airbus airplane production and today for the A400M. So space can also play the role as a door opener in terms of processes. Because if it works for space, it will work anywhere. So processes were one big shooter as well. There was no big investment behind. It was really mostly brain work.
Yeah, so that's to try and keep your commercial edge at all times. Yeah. So that you've got this machine that no one can really catch up with, because you're maintaining that commercial edge by nudging your price down as you go.
I have the great privilege that I experienced the golden age, where all stakeholders had incredible margins. So Ariane was the only commercial access to space. There was not a second access after the Challenger accident, and this lasted over more than 10 years. So we wanted to be prepared for the aftermath. And it worked quite well, because it secured Ariane over nearly 20 years until the arrival of space billionaires.
And these improvements, I mean, you were talking about the cost improvements, but just the cost and performance also improvements of Ariane 5 kept going over the years, up to the launch of James Webb or the previous one. We are still talking about increases in performance.
This is the reason why Ariane 5 is 1/3 of the launch costs of an ELV, for example, of a Delta 4 or Atlas 5. The root cause is that there has been performed a big cost killing effort, which has been continued then with Ariane 6, with again spectacular results. Ariane 6 having a price tag which is close to 50% again with respect to Ariane 5. This is really the last step, the best what you can do before reusability. And reusability will be very clearly the next step, that's for sure.
Yeah, so you, with something like Ariane 5, and you've gone through this like brutal cost cutting exercise, and you're going, and obviously safety, I'm assuming, and is still paramount, but you're sort of knocking off the price. At some point, did someone say, with this particular design, we're now hitting that brick wall? So Ariane 6 is that next step where you say, we're going to have to start with a whole new design if we're going to get the next bunch of cost savings. Is that roughly the story there?
6 is not really a completely new design. It uses high thrust liquid propulsion, it uses high thrust solid propulsion, it uses cryopropulsion. The main elements which have been developed for Ariane 5 are still on Ariane 6. In my view, Ariane 6 is a fully industrialized Ariane 5. The best Ariane 5 we ever got. And as you say, it is a sort of brick with a non-reusable launcher. I think this is the benchmark. You will not go far beyond and do something any better than Ariane 6. If you wish to cut by a factor of 5 or 10 launch costs, you need something new. And the something new is reusability, for sure.
And Rudy, you are currently at ESA the head of the preparation of the future for space transportation, right? And so we are going to talk a little bit about all this future and reusability. But before that, we just had a quite historical launch last week. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
I do. I remember.
If you have any memories left. And I understand that you of course you were talking about the James Webb Launch, and I understand you and some of your colleagues like Daniel Deschambault as well, you guys have been involved in this project for a long time, right? With NASA and with the different stakeholders, Arianespace as well. Can you tell us a little bit about this process? How in the world did James Webb ended up on top of an Ariane 5?
That's an adventure, huh? So, first of all, it didn't happen 3 years ago. This is a long-term, strong motivation for international cooperation. And at the very beginning, selling a big project which is at the edge of science, as Webb is, one of the sales arguments which helps is international cooperation. Saying we are doing this in a theater and Europe is interested, Canada is interested, we are not alone. This is something of interest for the overall international science community. So at the very beginning, this was one of the international cooperation projects NASA was discussing with partners at the end of the 90s. And at that time already, the European launch solutions were very attractive because high cadence and very reliable. So this was a selling argument, and this is something.
The golden period you were talking about.
Yeah, the golden period. This is something we should be proud altogether, because this international cooperation was selected for political reasons, sure, but not only. there was also a technical reason behind Germany, and Europe was really good and is really good in the launch business. So this was at the end of the 90s, and Europe decided, as far as I know, to participate around 15 to 30%. 13% was the number, and this is the observation time we get today back from this investment. Things became serious later, so web design started. The decision was taken quite early to go for a foldable mirror. This was a revolutionary decision. And one of the reasons for taking Ariane 5 was also the big payload compartment, with Ariane 5 has a diameter of 5 meter 40 and offers an inner diameter usable for spacecraft beyond 4 meter 50. So that's again best in class. So the payload conditions of Ariane 5 were best in class. The performance which was offered and the growth potential was best in class. The reliability was top. So a lot of reasons. Things became serious then later, and I remember very well when I went for the first time to Baltimore. It was in November, and there I heard personally for the first time the name Obama. Never heard about a politician named Obama, and he was running there for primary, and this was in 2007. 2007, things started to become serious. We made a preliminary mission analysis together with NASA. We, meaning Arianespace as launch operator, NASA and ESA as agencies. And then shaping started. And the real work started quite late in 2015. And we really had 4 years of intense adaptation work to adapt Ariane 5 to this jewel that has some specificities which needed quite some adaptation work. And this occupied us over the last 4 years until this wonderful Christmas gift you were talking about brought to us on the 25th in the morning with a wonderful web launch from French Guiana.
I think I could feel the global as the payload released in space. I could feel the whole global astronomy community relaxing their shoulders all at once.
No, it's a long way to go yet, though, Julio.
I know, but launch is a big part of it. And really, how about you? Because you were one of the leaders behind Ariane 5 for this particular launch. How does it feel to have such a responsibility now that we know that it went well, right?
First of all, you described it well. It was quite a spiritual moment when Webb released. For me personally, I had a circle which remained unbroken between the first Ariane 4 launches, the first Ariane 1 launches, the first Ariane 4, which I witnessed, and now Webb. Webb was something culminating because we all felt part of a sort of stardust community of science and industry, bringing this jewel up there. So something very spiritual of a great accomplishment, and being a little part of it was quite a big feeling. In terms of responsibility, yes, it is something special if you have a customer for 10 billion on board, which cannot be replaced. If you fly 2 telecom satellites, it is an economic endeavor of an important endeavor. But if it fails, you will find replacement. And here you will not. Here you will have a generation of astronomers, a generation of telescope builders being around you, and you have destroyed something irreplaceable. So this brought an extra responsibility on us. And I would not say that we put more care into this launch, because we wanted to do it as precise as all the others, not overdoing things, and overdoing things means doing things wrong. We wanted to put all needed emphasis, but doing it as well as all the others. But
that was a question I was going to ask. Was you've been knocking down the prices, but lots of these launches, obviously, they're different. You need different. You've adapted them and things like that. You've already answered the question, I guess, and I guess I knew what the answer was going to be. But is there no temptation when there's a launch that's as monumental as this, as you say, it's a generational launch, that there's this kind of memo that goes out to the engineers and the builders saying, you do know that when you're building this is for the web, this component, so it better be right. Is there none of that going on? Or is that just always built into the actual into the building of any specific Ariane launch vehicle?
In general, we do not dedicate launch vehicles to missions. You could swap them at the latest moment. And this we could have done with Webb as well, just changing the vehicle for Webb. What we tried to do for Webb was to select some best components for providing best injection precision. So we took the inertial navigation units with best precision together. We used, for example, one Vulcan engine, which was quite one of the best we've ever built, meaning that it has had a very precise performance, allowing to very much fine-tune the trajectory again. So these kinds of things we did with the hope to give some extra not sold performance to Webb. If you are very precise in injection, Webb needs less of its own propellants to come to the final L2 orbit. And each kilogram of propellant which is saved during this final positioning gives extra lifetime to the telescope. So this was something where we have been working on. We took great care not to have difficult waivers to instruct during production, for example. So in this but in a quite natural way, I think all our engineers over the supply chain took care, saying, this is for Webb. I have a second look, sure.
So your example would say that the Vulcan engine is you'd say build 4 of them, you'd stick them on the test stand, and the one with the best tolerances is the one that you put on the James Webb launch vehicle. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, because we could do it. So we took the one which was the most precise, and it was available. So we would have been criminals not to use it. Very simply. So when we could, we did it, but we did not wait for years and then pick out the best of the row. Because I have to say
it paid off. It paid off because I think it was only 2 days ago that NASA made this statement and how the lifetime of James Webb, if it deploys correctly, right, it will be significantly beyond 10 years, thanks to a big part of it in the precision on how Ariane 5 performed for its launch.
Yeah, this was the right in the middle philosophy. Take all the components with the best precision in terms of variation of thrust, for example, for the engines. The solids as well. We took a pair of solids, which was really very nicely tuned.
So now that let's say the show is over for at least the Ariane part, okay? How do you feel? Do you feel some pride, some I don't know, more relaxed? How do you feel now?
First of all, totally relaxed. This is something where you really, and I think, Julio, for you have witnessed the launch as I have done it. This moment is spectacular. When Webb went off and you saw the solar arrays coming out 2 minutes later, this big relief is something which is spectacular, and we all had it. And I still do have it. Pride, yes, but as a member of a community, not as an individual. I'm not proud of what Rudy has been doing, because this was just a little part of the community. But I feel as a European and as a partner of NASA, I share this pride with the colleagues from NASA. It's a big community. It's really a world community of science and rocketry. And this pride that we have now, these wonderful, sharpest eyes ever built in space, yes, I think we all share it.
Yeah, I mean,
even I'm relieved. The launch, I've never been so tired during all this year than the last 3 days.
For the last 3 years, I would say, on the podcast, virtually, I don't think there's an episode that went by where we didn't sort of stress over the James Webb launch, and I've, as in, it just felt like the most stressful launch that there will ever be. Like you said, it's a generation of work on top of a rocket. Where the Americans are looking at the Europeans going,
but it's a generation of work past, but it's also defining a whole generation of future work for astronomers.
Yeah, exactly. So the stakes couldn't be higher, and we've stressed about it. And then when the launch happens, it's like I was super relieved, but I don't feel as I've had the same amount of relief as the stress that I've had. So I can only imagine that's like multiplied by 1 billion.
Well, because it's still deploying.
It's not over. And I mean, Webb is opening science in so many areas. It's just incredible. Having the possibility to get a feint of the dark age, having the opportunity with spectrometers to look into planets' atmospheres, and it brings us so much closer to our origins and to the origins of life. That for me personally, the stress is over once we get the first nice, sharp picture commissioned in 6 months. Then we will all lean back all together, because all our colleagues from science at ESA and in the community, they still have the same pressure and no relief at all with respect to us. The launcher guys are the 10% happy few. We've done our job, so we cannot influence anymore the destiny of that.
Is there more stress and pressure with the science payload type payloads? You know, you because you've done Rosetta, you've done Bepi Colombo and things like that on an Ariane 5. Are they more stressful than when you were doing, you know, geostationary satellites up to, because of this thing you said that they're kind of not replaceable, and they're like a whole community's work rather than a commercial entity's work.
Especially when you have to hit a certain launch window, by the way.
Yeah.
So is that were they more stressful launches? The kind of science ones. I mean, obviously the Webb one is just has that with bells on.
No, but other ones were spectacular as well. Well, the first spectacular launch we did with Ariane for Science, one of the first, was a crazy idea of an astrophysicist who wanted to use an aspirator to get stardust on board and to analyze it on board of a sonde. So Ariane 1 was launched to fly the Giotto mission to get stardust on board of a probe and to chemical and physical research on it. And if you do that with the launch moment, with a unique opportunity, and you know that the next opportunity is coming in 178 years or so, this is another form of stress with respect to geostationary satellites. And I had a lot of stress also with telecom satellites at the beginning. That this was because we all were so young and lacked experience. But science by nature, the exploration by nature weighs only once. And if you go there once.
This payload that you mentioned that was aspired to take dust. Was that the Giotto mission?
It was Giotto flight 14,
86
in 85.
Because Comet Halley was in 86.
Yeah, but it was before.
Right?
It was a mission which was imagined by Roger Bonnet. And when it was done, we were all very relieved. And then our colleagues from science came back 6 months later saying, so this was nice, but now we want more. Now we want to land. The next one was Rosetta.
That's Rosetta. Really, I don't know if I ever told you, but Kyoto was probably the reason why I ended up in working in the space.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, Carl Sagan was a big influence, but this launch, I remember 1986, I was in Argentina, 7 years old. My parents woke me up to see this comet.
You saw the Halley comet?
I saw it when I was in. My parents woke me up middle of the night to see it, but also the mission that was most known was Giotto, with images coming from the European Space Agency. But that idea of going to a comet is probably what 7 years old. Your launch of Giotto was my Apollo in a way.
Yeah.
It's. Yeah,
and imagine, Julio, that today there's a 7-year-old boy in Argentina who's heard about Webb, and this will happen again. Meaning, you have these unique experiences, and I very well remember the years 85, 86 comet years between Giotto chasing a comet and Halley being a universal event like Live Aid. These were the first universal events which melted at least my generation together.
Yeah, and thanks to the precision of Ariane 5, if you were 7 watching the James Webb launch, you might even get to use it when you got to university.
As an astronomer, yes, that's crazy.
Yeah, which is crazy, isn't it? Yeah, that's absolutely amazing.
Rudy, you mentioned all this. You were going into all these different big launches that we had. Matt mentioned some of them, like you even mentioned Rosetta. There was also big launches like the ATV. Do you have any particular favorites or anything particular to highlight?
My heart beats for science. That's very, very clear, because once they are up, these machines produce so many surprises and give answers to questions which have never been raised. This is something which, for me, is the most fascinating part, science and exploration.
And now we have 5 Ariane 5 launches left, right?
We still have 5 left. Yes.
Okay.
We will probably do 4 next year. And the last one will then be again a very special one. And Ariane 5 will fly probably its goodbye mission with a science mission called JUICE, bringing us closer to the icy moons of Jupiter. So Ariane 5 will then retire, but can be proud of its scientific success. A launcher which went to Jupiter, a launcher which went twice to the second Lagrange point, once with radar telescopes, Herschel and Planck, now again with Webb. Ariane 5 chased asteroids with Rosetta. So it's a jewel for science. I think our colleagues from science, they have a special part of their heart in favor of Ariane 5 as well. But 6 will follow. We will have science missions with Ariane 6, which will be exciting as well.
I think I'm a little bit subjective, right? But to me, it's one of the better looking rockets out there. The shape is so iconic. You mentioned that you were in the transition from Ariane 4 to Ariane 5. And now we're going to have this same transition, right? With the lower number of Ariane 5 launches as we build up the cadence for Ariane 6. What do you take from that early transition from Ariane 4 to Ariane 5? How is life in our area during that period? I imagine really busy at the spaceport in particular.
First of all, it happens each 25 years. So there's no experience built up. We are not in the car industry where you have a transition from one model to the next each 3 to 4 years. In space, a change of generation of launches happens each 20 to 25 years. So something where you cannot build on experience. In terms of complexity, all eyes will be riveted to Ariane 6 to get the new baby well born. And the last year of a development is an extremely exciting year, because you get this beast alive, and this beast showing its life will show some surprises, and all this final testing will be very intense. So you will have all engineering focusing on this final year of development. What is very difficult, and this will be our challenge next year, and we will succeed it, is to get the right engineering level also for keeping Ariane 5 in a sort of best in class in quality. And I know that around Ariane 5, there are some very motivated people, and this is what counts. People count. Nothing else. People count. And if you place the right people, and this is the case for Ariane 5, around these last years of exploitation, I'm confident that it will go right. And we have the right people in Ariane 5. And again, what's very interesting, I did the last launches on Ariane 4. I was in charge of launch engineering for Ariane 4 at the end of the Ariane 4 exploitation. And it was very, very interesting, because I was working like an entrepreneur, quite alone. And we took decisions in small teams, and all eyes were riveted on Ariane 5 and the upcoming first ECA launches of the new cryo upper stage. So we were in a sort of shadow, but having a lot of responsibility on our shoulders in Ariane 4. And this will happen again on Ariane 5. So it's a very good engineering school for young engineers as well, because you get your part of responsibility.
That actually was one question. I always think you've got this stream of data that comes off a rocket like Ariane 5. Is there new information each time that a rocket like that flies that is surprising and unusual that you try and get to the bottom of, or is it mostly routine data? What's the story there?
That's something which is really surprising. And a rocket is like a body, like a human body in that way. Even the last Ariane 4 brought us surprises, something we had never seen before. And we would not expect that we would need 116 flights to get another surprise, where we all did not understand at the very beginning what was happening on board. And this still happens on Ariane 5. I mean, in rocketry, I think we are there where aviation was in the 30s of last century, meaning that we are starting to build a real business and things are really ramping up. But there are still a lot of unknowns. And on Ariane 5, this is part of the excitement for engineers as well, that you get really difficult, sometimes difficult news, and you work over more than 1 year to understand a complex technical issue. This is really fun. There's no routine. Routine is for the next generation.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting, because I guess a lot of people just see a rocket and just think it's a tank full of fuel with a candle on the bottom.
Yeah, sure.
And it's exploding, but I guess, yeah, and it's just the fact there's so many so many different data points going on, and it's really surprising that you can have just new data and surprising data on something that's so tried and tested.
Yeah, but you are flying at the edge. You're flying off the edge of technology, of the edge of knowledge, and of the edge of your materials. And then look to this. It seems a lot if you look to Ariane 5, Ariane 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, roughly 250 flights. Well, each flight is half an hour. So you divide 250 by 2, you have 125 hours locked in your space lock. Well, I have more than 3,000 glider hours. I'm a much more routine glider pilot than a rocket engineer.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's a great way of looking at it. Yeah,
let's put it in perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Imagine a car manufacturer, the millions of hours that they have of data.
For testing.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Never saw it in that angle.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, Rudy, now we were discussing the final flights of Ariane 5, and you are currently wearing two hats. On the one side, you're heading Ariane 5 and the remaining flights for ESA, but you're also the head of the ESA future preparation for what is space transportation, right? So I wanted to get a few words from you on what's going on, where are we going with this, what's the future like? You're welcome to dream.
Thank you for the invitation. First thing, there are two elements. I think the first element is that we will have to find the European way to build the future without trying to copy, but to learn. And this we did in the past already with Ariane. We've discussed the Ariane success story at the beginning, and it was not a copy of what has been done in the past. For the future, I see enormous possibilities by the birth of an eighth continent around Earth. And my understanding is that the business which started with space transportation 30 years ago will become a much more interconnected business with the space ecosystem, delivering services and being solidly connected to ground. Much more than today. It will become much more embedded, and it will become much more difficult to define the frontier between what space is and what ground-based business is. So we will have much more embedded services. In connectivity is just the first example, and fast connectivity will never work without a strong space-based segment. Many other business areas will raise once we have more populated this eighth continent around us. And our approach in Europe should be based on services like a travel agency, imagining a lot of new destinations, a lot of new ways to move to these destinations. Meaning that we will not have in future the one single solution. We will call it Ariane 5, Ariane 6, Ariane 7, or whatever. It will become, in my view, an ecosmos which will be populated by very different vehicles, by in-orbit services, by fueling stations in orbit, by deliveries which go from one logistic hub to another one. And this will happen in the next 15 years. And it will need a European way of doing it. And these European solutions are prepared now with demonstrators, which will already provide learnings in the next years, from next year onward. So future is happening now, and what the ecosystem which will be populated by space services in 15 years is started to be developed now.
Can you give us an example of one of those sort of demonstrator programs?
Yes, I'll give you some demonstrator examples just to highlight that. The first thing we need to do is to take care of the environment. Ariane 1 to 5 and 6 are wonderful launches, but if you wish to ramp up the access to space, you need to change paradigms, and you need to come to ultra-green launch solutions. This is something where we would like to put the European tech on it, to use biopropellants, to take care of propulsion, to have a minimum pollution. And here we have the first test beds running next year already. We have an engine demonstrator which cuts cost by 10 and pollution by a factor of 100, called Prometheus, which will ignite next year. It will be used then to fly test beds to learn reusability in a European way, first from Kiruna in Sweden for hot tests to atmosphere, then a year later from Kourou. And we will learn fast, and we will produce progresses fast in the next 6-7 years. And if we succeed to build these ultra-green transport services to space and in space and in return from space, I think we will again succeed to do something in the European way. Maybe not with billionaires' money, maybe not at the same scale, but in another way of doing business, with high social standards and with high environmental standards.
Yeah, well, it's certainly something that the science community and the actual kind of, particularly the European science community, I suppose, would be totally for, I guess. It's obviously in there. Is there any other kind of, you talked about sort of in-space services like space depots and stuff like that. Are those sort of demonstrators in the pipeline as well?
Yeah, sure. One of the keys for economy is cadence, and if you use launches only to go from the Earth to space, you will never create the cadence. You will need heavy launches to do exploration. You will need smaller ones to deploy constellations, etc. You will need specialists for each business area. So you will have a fleet of launches. And the fleet of launches will create high fixed costs, and high fixed costs will kill you in terms of environment, because you have a high footprint on Earth in terms of costs. So the first thing you need to do is to get to space as easy as possible with a high cadence. And this is this warehouse approach where you have a logistic platform being, for example, at 800 kilometers in LEO, and you fly everything to this platform, and then you dispatch by little specialists which remain in orbit and which refuel in orbit. So lots of new services to be generated in the coming years. Propulsion depot would just be one example. And using also specialists for debris removal and for cleaning, and having them then on board to get their electrical propulsion refueled. All this kind of services will emerge, because one thing is clear: we cannot continue to pollute the space as we have done it over the last 70 years. This is impossible. So we need to clean up, and we need to be able to do this in an economic way. So we will have debris removal demonstrators, for example. The first one will fly in 3 years and show how to operate that. Life extension modules, giving extra life to. Imagine if we could send a life extension module to Webb. Some of my colleagues are starting to think about that. Would be wonderful. And to just give 10 extra years to Webb, which would be a pity to have such a jewel with sharp eyes at L2, but with sitting on empty tanks.
We have to wait now for the final calculations to see how many years Ariane 5 gets to Webb.
So I mean, is that something when Ariane before James Webb launched, where they, is there a part of that spacecraft itself where an object could attach to in the eventuality that someone did come up with a mission extension vehicle of some description?
So there's no hook. There is no adapter where you just have to hook on. But as far as I know, the web designers took care that they do not shut any doors, that the possibility remains at reach. But they had so many firsts to succeed that this would have been the one first too much.
Long down on the list, yeah.
Rudy, you mentioned space debris there, and that reminded me of the recent anti-satellite test and how that put I believe it put the ISS. The ISS had to send the astronauts to shelter, right? And then, of course, I started thinking about the astronauts, and I was wondering. There has been a lot of talk recently of Europe and ESA having its own way to send astronauts to space. And I was wondering if you could say a few words about that.
I could say some personal words about that, because this is a societal question which is more given to political leaders. I'm a total fan. I mean, I'm an Apollo kid, so what else could I be than a fan of manned space transportation and a fan to find ways to get this more and more accessible to humanity. So yes, on each vehicle we have looked to it. We started to look at it in a fan club already on Ariane 4. On Ariane 5 we had a hidden file, and we knew at each moment the effort required to get it man-rated. For Ariane 6 we would know that as well. But at the very end, it's a political decision whether Europe wants to be part of this big game or just a spectator asking for seats to others. I don't think that we should be a spectator. I think we should have our own seats. And I think that we could afford that. So we are starting fact-finding analysis right now to build these facts for political stakeholders to discuss it. But again, will this discussion result in a strong decision? I hope so. And I hope that we will build the arguments around. But this is something which is not in our hands.
Do we need to ask the public to start calling decision makers to support it? From the podcast?
I think that yes, we should have a general wake-up call. We are in a new space race, and this new space race goes also through human space transportation. We are getting more and more confidence that access to space will become much cheaper in the future. So, and if we do not take first decisions now, we might be left behind. We can change that today.
Yeah, because I mean, if we looked at a sort of a similar situation in, say, India, where India have got their own human space program, the criticism there is, of course, it's at the cost of the Indian science program. Would that not be the case? Would that not be the case in Europe?
Of course, it will be. I mean, it will be at the cost of someone. If you put it in relation, I'm not thinking about a 10 billion program, which has been proposed and cancelled in the past. The grey and white hairs will well remember Hermes in the 80s and its difficult death. I think we can do first steps, more in the class of some hundreds than some billions, and build first own experience. This should be at reach and should be a challenge for all of us. And then again, it is a societal question, like Webb is. You won't earn any money with Webb. So what is it useful to launch a laboratory, a telescope for 10 billion? No, you will not earn any money. Going to opera tomorrow, and operas don't earn any money. It's part of curiosity and culture.
So we have a few standard questions that we ask. First, if there is one space song that comes to your mind that we can add to our playlist.
Although we don't normally have a David Bowie band.
Yeah,
because too many people say David Bowie. But
yeah. So this is why I didn't want to pronounce his name.
There's nothing wrong with Bowie. He's just very popular.
I like John Lennon, Lucy in the Sky, because you can imagine whatever you want with this song.
That's a good choice.
It's a good choice. Do you know what? I don't even think it's on either, amazingly. I might have to, I mean, it's a great choice. What a song.
Space mining.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about space mining, or the
He knew it all along.
or the mission that's just gone to Jupiter, right? It's called Lucy. So the very last question we always ask is, was there some individual who was really inspirational to you that you would actually like to sort of show around what you're doing now and for them to see? I mean, normally we're talking someone that's died. It doesn't have to be, but is there an inspirational person that you would want to see your kind of the work that you've been doing?
Some of the space pioneers, I think, which have never seen their ideas put into praxis. Look to Tsiolkovsky, who's been a teacher in an elementary school, and he has published his book, and he has never seen the success this has created. Hermann Oberth in Germany would be another example. Even if Oberth went high into his 90s, I was a young student of him in the early 80s, and I would like to meet him again and show him a jewel like Webb. I think these people.
Oh wow! So you've met Oberth?
Yeah, he was one of my teachers.
Oh wow!
But he was already in his 80s, and he was still teaching.
Oh, that's crazy! Yeah. What a legend! That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. That almost seems improbable. I could be speaking to someone that's
because you idealize.
That's blown my mind.
You idealize and put people on a pedestal, but they were real people as well.
Yeah, they once were real people.
Yeah, but crazy, I mean, he was in his 80s, and I started aerospace engineering in 1980. So he was still, as seen from today, was quite a young man.
Yeah, amazing. So the one question actually before you run out of batteries on your headphones was, you mentioned that there was 2 or 3 people that were at the very start of the Ariane story, the Ariane 1 and their crazy idea. Who were those people?
For sure, Frédéric Dall'Est. He was a clear visionary in terms of engineering, but also at the same level in terms of business. The second one would be Ralf Jäger. He was the first commercial director of Arianespace, and he convinced Dall'Est that they could beat the shuttle in business. Like something totally crazy to think this in 1980, that you could beat the big beast, which would fly 50 times per year at a fraction of costs. So the second crazy I would name would be Ralf Jäger. He's still teaching at Berlin. And for the third one, I would take an operational guy, Guy Dubois, who invented the concept of a launch factory. Okay, we are no more in our pioneer age. Let's build a real factory, a launch factory producing up to 18 missions per year, because we were able to accelerate. And this was something which happened on Ariane 4 quite a lot. Nobody saw it because Ariane 4 made its 12 missions per year. But out of the 12, it happened that 9 were done in the second half of the year to save the business of the customers. And then you get nice extra tech as well if you get the transponders up on time. So 3 different people, one for his commercial vision, one for his overall vision, and one because he was able to imagine that space could be a normal industry.
Brilliant answer. Thank you. I'm glad I asked. Thank you very much. I think thank you very much for that. It's been an absolutely brilliant interview.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Julio, for this nice discussion. I really loved it.
The Interplanetary podcast is alive!
There we go. I enjoyed that interview immensely. But something else I enjoyed immensely this week was watching the film Don't Look Up. Have you seen it?
I have seen it a few nights ago. Did you really enjoy it? I found it quite depressing.
Well, obviously it's depressing, but that's kind of the enjoyment of it, isn't it? It's kind of...
Yeah, I mean, it was directed by Adam McKay, right? Like this is a guy that made like movies like The Big Short. He's very good at explaining complex topics to the masses. He's sort of hero of me in terms of science communications, right? And how he makes it real and easier to understand. And the movie is brilliant.
And it's humorous as well. He's one of the comedy writers on Anchorman as well, Adam McKay.
Yeah. He worked for many years with Will Ferrell. Yeah, he's a comedy writer, but he went into this tangent of these sort of movies about, I don't know, the financial collapse or the idea of a near-Earth object hitting our planet. I
mean, it's unusual because the other two events, the Big Short and Vice, those two big films are obviously events that have happened, and it's done in a certain way. So if you like those two films, this is events that could happen, but done in a very realistic and very depressing way. It's. I just thought it was brilliant. I just thought it was such a good film.
But there you go. The day that an asteroid or a comet hit our planet is not an if, it's a when.
Yeah,
right?
It's a when.
And if we would happen now, we are in a way we are in a good spot. In a way in which we would have the technology to deflect it, hopefully. And there was the DART mission launched a few weeks ago to start working on demonstrating this capability. But on the other side, we are in this society today in which when I watch this movie, it's not that crazy, the reaction of the politicians and the reaction of the public, right? In a certain way, you can see it with climate change. We know that climate change is the asteroid or the comet that is coming, and we are failing to act on it.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Or COVID.
Well, climate change, isn't it? It's climate change, which I talked about last week, and I guess you, because I thought it was a bit of an allegory about COVID, but I think it is more of an allegory of climate change.
An allegory on climate change, but also an allegory on planetary defense and NEOs. Again, it's a when, not an if.
Yeah, and also like our distrust in science and authorities. I mean, you've got to like a film that mentions the peer review process and how important it is. And also there is a slight dig, isn't there, at Bezos and Musk and Branson in terms of the, large sort of corporations and tech people are not necessarily the best people to listen to when it comes to saving the planet.
Funny. So the rich guy made you think of Musk and Bezos and Branson.
And Jobs, really. That's it was kind of almost based on Jobs, wasn't he?
To me, it was when I saw that character, it made me think of Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs combined.
Yeah.
Not so much Musk or Bezos or Branson. I mean, just Branson is a lot more charismatic than that guy in the movie. And Musk is a lot more technically knowledgeable than the guy in the movie, right? I mean, I don't know what to say about Bezos, but the other two guys, I think, are they have qualities on their own, and I don't see the mix with the character. But yes, Zuckerberg and Jobs as a mix for this.
But it was, but it's interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting thing of, the solutions to things aren't necessarily high-profile, self-acclaimed techno geniuses. I think, that's how I took it anyway.
Yeah, sometimes you need certain... you cannot invent everything from nowhere and expect that it magically all works at once. Yeah, you need the time of testing and validation and evolution, right?
Well, it reminded me of when Musk wanted to send his mini submarine to save the kids in the cave, and it's like, and having a go at the guy because he just wanted to do it in the traditional method. And it's just like, don't call him a pedo just because.
Well, I listened to a very good podcast recently that went on multiple episodes on the story of this underwater cave rescue, which in the end, they'd say the classical way, and it was risky, but it worked and everyone survived. Maybe I can drop I can I can promote that podcast here for a second. They are not paying me anything, but it's called Against the Odds. And the first couple of episodes are about the cave rescue, and it's brilliantly done. And then actually after that, they go into the expeditions to the Antarctic. So also another favorite topic. Anyway, I digressed.
Right. Amazing.
I digressed.
No, you have digressed.
What do you think What do you think of the president?
I mean, talk about star cast, isn't it? For a Netflix original, it makes you realise just how much that's calling the shots. If that's your cast, it's pretty good, isn't it?
I don't think it's so much Netflix as I think it's Adam McKay, because look at his previous movies. Again, The Big Short.
Yeah.
The names on that movie. I think people know how intelligent he is and how those movies have a long shelf life and are historical in a way, and they want actors probably, or at least these high-level actors, want to work on interesting projects, intelligent projects like the ones Adam McKay does. I really like Adam McKay, as you can see, right? But
yeah. I mean, I really liked The President's Son. That was very good.
Yes, he was in Superbad. Remember his first movie?
He's
I completely forgot his name. Anyway, Leonardo DiCaprio, brilliant. I mean, for someone that started as in Titanic, as casted as like the good-looking boy, now playing like a middle-age or late-age astronomer.
And it starts with a little puppet of Sagan, doesn't it, as well? And a bit of astrodynamics.
Yes. You paid attention. I like that part.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like the explanation on how they start to determine the trajectory of the comet as well. And the drama when he was about to write the orbit. That was subtle. The whole story of the talk shows and how grotesque that is.
Yeah,
but it's not unreal. It's not unreal.
No. It's totally how it will play. Depressingly, I don't think it will play out like that. But
in a way, you know what it reminded me of in a way, the movie Spinal Tap.
Yeah,
because it's. Someone was telling me the other day that someone watched it's one of his favorite movies, and so he wanted to watch it with his wife. They both had worked in the music industry. So they both watched the movie. He finds it really funny as usual, but the wife doesn't find it funny at all. And only at the end of the movie, they realized that the wife was never told that this was not a documentary. That this was so she always thought it was just, yes, of course, this is what happens in roadshow and in road trips of music bands, right? And
it's so ridiculous, the ending about just working in a shoe shop. Yeah, what are the hours?
But this one as well, if it wasn't that it's a movie, it could be reality. And that's the depressing part. Yeah. It's a good movie. I think it's an important movie to have.
Yeah, no, I do. Do you know what? I think it will. I think it possibly might get people thinking about it, because it certainly has with the people that I watched it with. In this country, there was an MP called Lempik Opik, who's most famous for going out with one of the cheeky girls. And he was the only politician that ever really took asteroid strikes seriously. He was a member of the British Interplanetary Society. His great-grandfather, Opik, is a very famous Latvian or I can't remember, maybe it's Latvian, astronomer as well. So it was, so he's got a connection. But yeah, there's only been ever one MP in this country that's ever been concerned with asteroid strikes, and it was him.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, I have been somehow interested in this topic almost since university. I remember when I was in Space Generation, I helped run one of these paper competitions called Move an Asteroid. Just, funding and giving scholarships to students to go to the International Astronautical Congress with novel ideas on planetary defense missions, right? But you're right. It except maybe for movies like Armageddon, never really in the public eye on a high level, which is crazy.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's lots of disaster movies, but I think this one is probably the one that kind of is the wake-up call to, are we really going to treat it like this?
It's the most realistic one. It's the most, because
exactly.
even at some point they play with the idea of like, some big guy with a nuclear weapon going up there like Armageddon and Bruce Willis, and then doesn't work, right? So
it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Anyway, Matt,
I think we better wrap it up.
Yes,
this has been a long
another not short episode.
Thank you very much, Julio, for joining me again. And I guess this will be the first podcast of the year. We're starting how we're meaning to go on.
Yeah, that was quite a way to end 2021 with the
amazing way to end 2020. Yeah,
quite a way to start it with the interview of Ruedegar Albat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Indeed.
Right,
okay, Matt.
That's it. Bye, Julio.
Happy New Year, Matt. Bye.
And you. Happy New Year, everyone. Bye.
Bye.